In the bustling city of Mangu, life moved at its usual frantic pace. People hurried through crowded streets, some laughing, some lost in thought, others weighed down by worries no one could see. But in the courthouse, in the heart of the city, time felt frozen. Everything seemed to be stopped. While Mangu lived and breathed outside, the courtroom felt dead. Because one by one, the judge announced divorce settlements in a flat, emotionless voice. Papers were signed. Lives were untangled. Love, if it ever had existed, was reduced to legal terms and financial figures. Among the stiff faces and quiet tension, Sandra was smiling. She sat calmly beside her attorney as the judge finalized the statement between her and her almost estranged husband. The fifth in just 6 years. She was getting everything she ever wanted: money, property, assets. This had always been her rule: get in and get out. Never stay too long enough to get attached. Never give a man time to truly know her. Sandra never married blindly. Before accepting any proposal, she researched her target thoroughly. He had to be rich, extremely rich, and he had to have something to hide: a secret, a mistake, a skeleton in his cupboard. That way, when things fall apart, as they always did anyways, she had leverage: quiet pressure, legal manipulation, a clean exit. The men never saw it coming. Well, how could they? Because she was so beautiful. They married her because of her beauty. It was striking. Because she had a warm smile that felt genuine. She was so intelligent, articulate, and she knew exactly what to say and when to say it. In 6 years, Sandra had built a fortune most people could only dream of. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. She was so greedy. Then she met Jones Adewale, a young billionaire, handsome, tall, confident, one of the most sought-after bachelors in the city. Unlike the men she married before him, Jones wasn't just rich. He was everything Sandra had ever wanted. They met in a bar, each stealing glances at each other across the crowded room. It felt like love at first sight, though neither would admit it yet. Tony stood up, walked up to her, and introduced himself. "I'm Tony," he said. Sandra had a polite smile on her face. Tony said, "Can I buy you a drink?" He was gentle, yet confident. She studied him for a moment. Polite? Well, respectful, a gentleman. She nodded. They sat down together, talking, laughing, and sharing stories until almost morning. It was effortless, a rare connection that neither of them had expected. After that night, they began to see each other more often. They had walks in the park, late dinners, quiet conversations over coffee. And with every meeting, the bond grew stronger. Tony eventually asked Sandra to marry him. Well, she hesitated. Commitment had always been her enemy. But Tony, he was so perfect. He had no skeletons in his cupboard. He had no weaknesses she could exploit. And worse, she realized she was in love with him. For the first time in her life, Sandra felt something she didn't want. She never allowed herself to fall in love. She felt something she didn't allow. She didn't want vulnerability. She didn't want to feel weak. Sandra refused Tony's proposal. I don't want marriage, she said gently. But, we can be lovers. No commitments, no complications. What do you think? Tony felt a pang of disappointment, but he nodded. I understand, he said softly. He held on to hope that one day she might change her mind. Their relationship continued, filled with laughter, late night dinners, quiet moments that felt almost real. But Sandra noticed that other women were drawn to Tony. Of course, why wouldn't they be? He's handsome. Everywhere they went, eyes followed him, whispers lingered, smiles aimed his way. And Sandra, who had always played the game, decided to act. If she married Tony, she could control the situation. She could keep the attention away. After all, she had nothing to lose, or so she thought. They were both wealthy, independent, and for Sandra, that was enough reason to say yes. Sandra smiled nervously as she adjusted. She told Tony, I will marry you. Tony was so excited, and they began to plan their wedding. On the day of their wedding, the hall was packed. Everywhere was filled. People were seated with family, friends, and well-wishers. The air buzzed with excitement. Yet, beneath it all, Sandra felt a strange flutter of unease. She tried to reach her groom, whom was not taking his call. Tony was nowhere to be seen. And as for Sandra, she was nervous. She kept on adjusting her veil and holding her bouquet. She sat down there quietly, waiting for Tony to call her back. Calls to Tony went straight to voicemail. Texts remained unread. The guests began to murmur, whispering amongst themselves. Tony was nowhere to be found. Seconds turned into minutes, and minutes turned into hours. The bride was waiting at the altar. The groom was nowhere in sight. By late afternoon, the room was nearly empty. Sandra's world collapsed quietly, yet completely. Tears pricked her eyes as the last guest trickled out. Abandoned at the altar, she returned to her apartment, numb and shaking, only to find a note slipped under her door. I've taken back all you took from my father. You thought you could play? Who is the best player now? My name is Jones Adewale. You thought you could calm my father? Her mind froze. Jones, her fiancé Tony, had been the son of her second husband, Mr. Ramsey Adewale. Every asset she had, she transferred into Tony's name. Everything except her apartment and a small reserve of cash was gone. He asked her to transfer everything because they would relocate abroad after the wedding. She had trusted him, thinking he was just another wealthy target. She had never suspected he was Jones Adewale, heir to the very fortune she had once stolen from. Sandra sank to the floor, the cold realization cutting deeper than any heartbreak. Ah! from a billionaire to almost nothing. Her wealth gone, her empire erased, and all it took was one man who played the ultimate game better than she ever could. Well, what goes around indeed comes around. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.